I absolutely cannot believe that I need to make this video today, but this is so important that like, if somebody doesn't take a stand on this issue, I feel like this is just going to get worse and worse and worse. And again, probably not enough people are going to see this video, so it's not going to matter. But you, my friends, hopefully can take this and use it as a point to educate the artists that you work with, and it'll hopefully make your life a little bit better. So I'm Joel Wanasek. I'm the co-founder of nailthemix.com, the coolest place to learn how to mix music on the internet. And today I want to talk about a very, very, very important topic, especially in regards to people that work on heavy music. And that is, what is mixing and what is not mixing? Now, that may seem obvious, but is it really? And the reason I know that it's not, because every week this happens to me. Now imagine this situation, because I'm sure you've been through it, where somebody hits you up and they're like, hey, I got a single. Can you mix it for me? And you're like, yeah, cool. Here's my rate. And they're like, okay, that sounds good. And then they'll be like, so you're going to edit it, you're going to tune vocals, and you're going to reamp all the guitars and the bass, and I got MIDI for my drums, so you can just throw them into your own software, right? And you're like, wait, hold on a second. Are you trying to hire me to produce your song? Or do you want me to mix it? Because there's a difference. First, before we kind of talk about that problem and how it's evolved and what you can do to combat it, let's talk about what is mixing and what is not mixing. Just like I had to make a video a while back on what a producer actually is with Rick Rubin, you know, when that debate was raging. I feel like I need to make one here on what a mixer actually does, because no one knows anymore, and the term is getting bastardized, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So we professionals that do this for a living, we need to educate people so they understand and they don't cause us a bunch of headaches, and we can do our best work. Because if you're reamping guitars and stuff like that, you're not going to do your best work. You know what I mean? So we'll talk about that too later. First off, what is mixing? What is not mixing? Mixing is the art of taking a finished production, right? Finished, keyword finished, laying those tracks out in your DAW or on a console and balancing, EQing, compressing, etc., using techniques and tactics to take a song and bring it to life and turn it into a song where a listener will listen and emotionally connect with the message of that artist. That's what a mixer does. You take a complete production and you make it sound inspiring, so the person listening to it connects with the emotional intent of the artist in the song. We're trying to sell, you know, make people mad in the mosh pit, or send chills down somebody's spine, or, you know, make somebody sad, or help heal their trauma. You know, like this is what we're doing. This is an emotional thing. Mixing is that. It's balance, it's EQ, it's, you know, compression, etc. Those are our tools that we use. But at the end of the day, we are just taking a song and bringing it to life emotionally. So when someone hits play, they're like, wow, I love this song. They're not like, wow, this snare drum's badass, right? That's what a mixer is. Now, what mixing is not is production. What is production? Reamping, editing, tuning vocals, right? Picking drum sounds. These are things that a producer should be doing. Now, why is this a problem in metal and not in other genres? Okay, well, here's the thing. In heavy music, I feel like we have by far the largest DIY scene. And personally, I think it's great because I work with so many artists over my career where they record themselves and they send it to somebody like me because they're like, hey, we got the production done, but we need somebody to mix it because we're not any good at that. You know, we can do it, but we can't compete at a high level. You know, we need something that slams, right? So bands will go, they will record themselves, or artists, you know, they'll do demos. You know, writers will do writing demos. You know, there's lots of different niches of people where they will work on music and they need somebody to mix that music for them to make it sound good. Now, the hard part is when we are self-producing things, the levels of experience are going to vary. For example, if you're, let's say, mixing for songwriters in LA or Nashville, those guys and girls, you know, they're pretty damn good at what they do. They can mix decently, but they hire mixers because they need it to sound like it's on the radio. So when they pitch that song to the publisher and to the artist and the label and the A&R and all that stuff, like, it sounds phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, like a finished product. So those people tend to turn in stuff that sounds pretty dang good. The problem is when you get people that don't have much experience, like they've got a basic setup with a, you know, starter interface and like maybe one microphone and like a guitar DI or something like that. And, you know, they're recording stuff by themselves and they, you know, they've been maybe dabbling with it for a year or two and they can't get the sounds that they want on a production side, but they don't want to invest the money to hire a producer for whatever reason. And they still want to make music and put it out. So then you get into a situation now where it's kind of like, hey, I've got guitar DIs, but I can't get a guitar tone I like. So can you get one for me? And I've got MIDI for my drums, and I couldn't go record in a studio, and I couldn't hire a drummer. And, but you know, just throw it in a software and get me some MIDI drums. And I've got program bass because I don't know how to play bass. So, you know, here's the bass. And then I've got some vocals, but I don't know how to really tune and edit them. And then it gets handed off to a mixer. And they're like, hey, can you fix all this stuff for me? And then the mixer's like, you know, your head explodes because it's not mixing, right? And it's like, my thoughts are, sometimes I'll explain to an artist when they hit me up. And like I said, this happens to me a lot. Many, many, many times, too many times. Like I said, enough that I've had to actually sit down and make a video about this. But I explained to them, like, look, I'm a mixer, okay? That means my time is expensive. Very, very expensive. Mixing isn't cheap. I can edit your song for you, but what it's going to cost me to do that versus, say, an editor, someone who just edits and that will do a phenomenal job, is going to be the price ratio for the same result is just absolutely ridiculous. Like, why would you pay 10 to 20 times more? You know, I mean, come on, go hire an editor and let them edit, because it's too expensive to hire me to edit your song, you know? So, you know, you have to explain this to the artist, and then they'll be like, okay. So again, this is where as a mixer, you can add value and you can say, hey, you know, I know this person, they're really great at reamping. For example, I have an assistant, Joe, who's been working with me for over 10 years, and he's phenomenal at it. So when an artist comes in and they can't get a guitar tone or they give it their best thing, Joe always beats their guitar tone. You know, we pay him to do it, and he's spectacular. He's just so good at it. He specializes in it. So there's people out there like that you can get to do great work at an affordable price. You can get to edit your stuff and things like that, and then take it to the mixer, because like I said, it costs too much for the mixer to do that. Now, in heavy music, it's a bit of an anomaly. I can't think of anybody in heavy music who just mixes. A lot of people that record heavy music also mix it, if that makes sense. Whereas in, like, if you go to pop or if you go to rock, there are people that just mix songs. You know, they're just mixers. For example, like, that's all I do. I just mix. I don't produce. I just mix. That's all I've done since 2016, but I produced for 15 years before that, you know? So it was like, there are people that just mix. In metal, you don't really find that a lot because the budgets are a little bit lower. So you find a lot of producers that mix. So what happens is it almost becomes an expectation that in metal music, you're going to at least reamp the guitars, because when you go hire one of these producer mixers, they're going to be so much better at guitar than most people on the planet that it's just like laughable to try to even compete with that, because they're so good. It's like if you hire Andy Steep to mix your song, you might as well let him do your guitars because he's the best in the world at it. You know what I mean? Like, I can't think of like anybody better at guitar tone than him. So you know what I mean? Like, it just makes sense. So I feel like that is kind of set almost a de facto standard in heavy music where it's almost expected. So now if you're a mixer and you're doing heavy music and you're not good at guitars, what you should do is you should try to find somebody who are like, hey, go to this person. They'll reamp you at $20 a song, $50 a song, whatever. I don't know what a reamper charges, but like I said, I have somebody, he has his own rate and his own deal, and that's it. Now, if you take this same mentality and you bring it over to rock music, and I mix a ton of active rock music, I will tell you from experience, all right, that if you go into a rock session and you mention reamping to a band that like doesn't kind of come from like heavy music, they kind of look at you like you're insane. Because the producer is like, what do you mean? We spent a week just getting guitar tones on this record. Why would I think I can beat that? I'm just the mixer. You know what I mean? So it almost like, if you go into a pop scenario, if you go into a rock scenario and you start offering reamping and editing, you know, people look at you like you're nuts. Like, for example, let's take big pop mixing. I will tell you right now that quite a few A-call pop mixers that I know, they will just take your Pro Tools session or whatever you produce in, and they will start with that. You will give that to them as their starting point, and then just make it sound, you know, just take that, make it 10% better. You know what I mean? Just a little bit better, clean it up. That's what they do. And if you have a mistaken edit in a thing, or a drum sample that's not triggering correctly, or something is off or not tuned, they're going to give you that mix back. I've seen it. I've heard stories about it. It's very, very interesting, where I feel like in a metal world, somebody in metal would fix that. So that's important to understand, is that you don't just go into like a rock session and be like, yeah, I'm going to reamp your guitars. I mean, I'll tell you a story. One time I was working on the new Scott Stapp album, and I sent Scott over his mix, and the producer and I were really stoked about it. And we reamped the guitars because, you know, we thought we had a cooler guitar tone than what they had gotten. And we sent it over to Scott, and Scott's like, man, this sounds great. Can you make it sound like the demo? I really like the tones on that. And we were like, oh, devastating. You know, it's like out of all the people in the world, you know, you don't want to disappoint. A diamond artist is definitely at the top of the list of people that you don't want to disappoint. So, you know, that's when you're like, oh my God, never again. You know what I mean? So he had fallen in love with a certain sound that he wanted and had a certain vision in his head. And I came in with a stupid metal mentality as a mixer, not a rock mentality. And I was like, oh, let me try to beat this guitar tone. And I changed it. And it didn't go over well. So again, next mix, I went back to the original tones and just kind of hyped up the demo mix and, you know, did that thing and just enhanced what the producer had given him and he'd fallen in love with. And then he was like, I love this, nailed it. So the lesson there is that each genre, you know, has kind of different rules. And if you're going to work in these different genres, you need to understand what the normal is and where it's okay to step in and where it's crossing the line. Because like I said, at the end of the day, if you're a mixer, your job is to mix. It's not to be a producer. So you should try to do everything possible to avoid being a producer. Now let's talk about why that's important. I'm a huge fan of separating prep tasks from mixing tasks when mixing. And the reason is because I don't really consider prep mixing. It's preparing to mix. It's prep, right? The reason is that when you sit down to mix, you need to be in a certain type of mindset. It's like an absolute alpha state. You've got to come in with such confidence, like I'm going to crush this track. I'm going to do the best work this band has ever had in their entire career and give them the sickest mix. And, you know, like you've got to have real confidence in your abilities to deliver a great mix. Because when you sit down and you hit play, you have to immediately be able to connect to that song and dive into it and just feel it, right? And if you're suddenly sitting there and you're like, oh, I need to reroute this and group this, guess what? You just lost the vibe. You just lost that energy. You just lost that confidence. If you're like, oh, that snare drum isn't right, let's go resample that. No. That's not mixing. I mean, it is, but it's mix prep. So it's very important to separate your prep tasks from mixing because it allows you to be 100% in the creative flow and zen of mixing, right? It allows you to keep that aggressive, I don't want to call it aggressive, but just like ultra confident energy where you're just like so focused on just crushing this mix and bringing this song to be the best it can possibly be, right? And not disrupting that flow state that you're in. And it just allows you to just have exponential creativity when you're mixing because, you know, you can't connect emotionally to a song if you're doing technical tasks. You know, it's a fully left brain thing to do prep and a fully right brain thing to do mixing. And you need to be able to do both. So if you want to be creative when you're mixing and really feel a song on an emotional level and connect with it and come in with confidence and just make the moves and know that the moves that you're making are the correct moves because you're feeling them on an instinctual level. You can't do that if you're, you know, like the left side of your brain is like, hey, we need to route this thing over here. Hey, I don't know if we've got this thing set up over here. This guitar tone isn't working. Let's go try some different amp sims on this. You know what I mean? If you want to be a great mixer, you need to separate your prep, right? Which is not mixing. Okay. Your prep in a different day or a different time period, or at least an hour between when you actually mix, or even more optimally is have a great assistant do it. So my assistant, Joe, sits down for many, many years and will prep an entire song, pre-mix it a little bit, you know, just kind of get everything roughed. And when I sit down and hit play, it sounds good. And I don't have to sit there and be like, ooh, I don't know if I like the guitar tone. Let's go address that again. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, all right, this is the guitar tone. Let's mix it. This is the bass. This is the vocal sound. Like everything is dialed in. And then you can focus on mixing the song, which is bringing the most emotional impact out of it. So like I said, if you want to be a great mixer, you have to understand, one, what mixing is, which we've talked about. And two, you need to separate, right, prep tasks that are not mixing from mixing. So when you're mixing, you can be a great mixer and you cannot be a great editor or a great track router in the DAW or, you know, session management pro. You know what I mean? Like you have to separate them. So, all right, I'm going to leave it there. That's enough of this rant. Like I said, I can't believe I had to make this video, but please share this with some bands or some people that you think could benefit from this, because I think this is just such an important topic, because the more we can separate those tasks, the better the productions are going to be. You know, the better you're going to be at mixing a song versus doing non-mixing tasks. You know, you got to separate it. It's just the only way. All right. If you like this type of content, please leave me a comment below. Click the like and subscribe and notification bell. I'm always doing like little mixing advice tips and stuff on my TikTok and Instagram. That's at Joel Wanasek. Thank you so much for watching this. And if you want to learn how to mix, it's nailthemix.com. Have a great day.